Pretty simple skit drama. Pretty easy to invite someone over for a meal and just hang out and have food. And who doesn't like some good food? Who doesn't like hanging around a table and just speaking with your friends and sharing a meal together? I want you to picture with me this morning, what is your most memorable meal that you have ever had, all right? Think back to a time where, you were just stuffed to the brim, like it was a great meal, you were around a table, maybe it was a birthday, maybe it was a wedding, maybe it was just some function that you had. I can remember growing up as a kid all the time, every Saturday and Sunday afternoon, we used to have these massive, big Sunday lunches. And I can remember just stuffing myself so much in like the rest of the afternoon. You're just full to the brim. There's nothing more you can put in your face or in your stomach. Can you relate with that? Yeah? Have you been around a table where there's lots of food, where you just can't wait to get into it? There's nothing better than that feeling. Do you guys enjoy food? Yes. Yes, that's what I'm looking for. Thanks, Naomi. However, I have to stand now. The cool thing is, when there's a table full of food and everything's great and, you're licking your lips to get into the food, but it's another thing if you've actually not been invited to the table. It's actually another thing if you actually haven't been invited to actually come and share a meal. Today I want to ask the question, and today's topic is to me it's kind of difficult. It's a difficult topic to speak about, but who would you not invite to the table? Who would you not invite to the table? Think a bit about it. There's a few names running through your brains right now, right? Who wouldn't you invite to the table? Maybe it's your boss, right? Your boss. You're just like, man, I'd hate my boss to be around the table. You have to put up with him the whole week and, just another time around the table. No, wouldn't want your boss to be there. Maybe it's a family member, You actually have to sit around the table all the time. But if you had your way, you'd just be like, you know what? There's just no way I want to be around this table with that family member. Maybe it's actually, if we go a bit deeper, maybe it's, someone who is actually an enemy to you, someone who you hate, someone who's betrayed you, someone who you're just so disappointed with, someone who, whenever you just think of their name right now, you get angry, you get upset. Maybe it's someone in your life who looks different to you, maybe because of their race, maybe because of the way they speak, maybe because of their sexual preference. Whatever it is, who would you not invite around the table? The reality is that today as we sit in church, myself included, there are definitely people that I do not want to invite around the table. Definitely people in my life that I think about and I think, you know what? I'd rather just hang out with my friends. I just want to be with people, who I can relax with and chill out with, and like Bree shared, just hang out in my PJs and don't have to think about how to strike a conversation. All of us have some prejudices in our life. We have some differences, and what we don't understand is that it's so simple to exclude these people from the table. A popular TV series at the moment, I don't know if you watched it or not, but it's on Netflix and it's all over the media, is 13 Reasons Why. This girl goes through her life story about why she's taken her life, and she sends all these different tapes after she's taken her life to all different people, accusing them of actually making her commit suicide, which I don't think is a responsible way of sharing about someone's own choice to take their life. But it does definitely highlight some ways on how so simple things could actually have such a profound impact on people's lives. It's interesting that we're living in a world and in a time where it's so easy to be connected to one another. Like it is so simple to connect with anyone in a second, no matter where you are. But yes, yet we're still living in a world that is so disconnected, where people are still feeling isolated, where people are still feeling lonely. It's a big thing here in New Zealand, all around the world, loneliness. Last week, we shared a bit about come and see, and we spoke about a sea, and who can remember what that sea was? Anyone? Conversation, all right? Yes. And we said, in this series, we want to be speaking about all these different topics, but most of all, we want everyone to actually just experience it themselves. So we shared about this topic of conversation, and Zalia spoke about, hey, let your conversation be full of grace and seasoned with salt, all right? Go towards outsiders and connect with them and converse with them. This week, I want to go a bit further and say, okay, so we converse, and last week we saw that, hey, conversations actually lead and bring connections. But now, how can we go deeper? How can we form this word called community? Community. What does community look like when you think of community? Because some of us, when we hear the word community might look like the chairs that only you want around the table. Community might look like just the true friends that you really want. Today I want to suggest to each of us, and I want to go into sort of some thoughts about that community. To me is a true, authentic friendship. That's what it is. Just true, authentic friendship. It's real friendship. It's the hard friendship. It's the friendship that, actually rubs against the grain. There are other lesser versions of friendship, and the less real versions are less because those friendships are less costly, they less committed, they less disruptive, they're less scary, they're less gritty, they're less gutsy, and they're less out of control than real friendship. Less real versions of friendship are also less rich. You see, we need these real friendships. But yet, most of us, as we sit here today, and as we'll discover soon, have a lot of these less versions of friendships. And the reality is, even though they make us feel better, and they're smoother, and they're a lot easier to have, in the long run, they leave us lonely and alone, and it's not good to be alone. God created us with this desire for community. He says that it is not good for any of us to be alone. Less real versions of friendship take several forms, and today I want to share with you these 3 less versions of friendship. Are you all with me? I'm going to read now, and I've got a lot of stuff that I want to share today, but I want us to grasp this concept of, hey, these seats around the table, who we're not inviting and why we're not inviting them. There are 3 friendships, less versions of friendships that this guy Scott Saul writes about in his book Befriend, and I want to share them with you. The first one is the digital friendship. In today's world of social media, each and every one of us know how connected we can be just on our phone but yet we still seek deep connections. It's not uncommon to be in a group of people that we're face to face with and to have everyone looking down on their phones. Maybe right now in church. Yeah? But on social media, we friend and we like and we follow each other, sometimes without ever actually really knowing who we really are and who the other person is. We call it an online community, but it actually falls really short of true, genuine, authentic community. You see, there are a lot of positives to the aspect of digital friendship, but by itself, digital friendship fails as a substitute for true friendship. Unlike true friendship, relating to others through screens, it makes it easy for us to actually hide. It allows us to put forth only the best, the most attractive, the most together, the edited, and the screened version of ourselves. Basically, digital friendship just helps us to have a seat around the table and make sure that any other person that looks a bit different or who we don't like, we just kick them out. Digital friendship also becomes the main way to relate to others. So what happens is, instead of entering the messiness of having real life conversations, we can easily just delete, or we can easily just scroll past, or we can easily just be a follower or a fan. But the thing about digital friendships is that there's a drawback, and that is that we never really get to know people. We never really get to know who they really are. And actually, they never really get to know who we are. You see, our digital friends are experiencing part of us, but not all of us. And when online relationships take priority of a real friendship, the result is usually more loneliness, more isolation. Digital friendship. The other aspect of friendship that he speaks about is this transactional friendship. Think about this friendship. Maybe you have some friends like this. The transactional friendship is the one that treats other people as a means to an end. It's when we relate this way, or we view people more as resources than as human beings. Instead of loving and serving them as we would in a real friendship, we use them to advance our careers, to build our platforms, to gain access to their social circles, to increase our self-esteem. And I feel important now because, I'm connected to her, and so on and so on. The pitfall of transactional friendships is so clear and so obvious that as soon as the relationship feels more costly than beneficial to us, as soon as the presence of the other person in our lives sees us to advance our personal goals, we discard the other person, or the other person discards us. The transactional friendship. And lastly, Scott shares about this one-dimensional friendship. He says, this one-dimensional friendship, it revolves around a single shared interest and not much else. The shared interest could be anything. It could be a hobby, a career path, a common enemy, an education, philosophy, a set of religious beliefs, and so on. He says one-dimensional friendships prioritize sameness, so views and convictions and practices are actually never, ever challenged. And we have blind spots that never, ever get challenged either. Friendships like these can offer the natural, the character-forming tension that diversity brings to our lives. One-dimensional friendship can't do that. And lastly, he says when celebrities limit their friendships to other celebrities, or parents to other parents, or married people to other married people, or single people to other single people, or athletes to other athletes, millennials to other millennials, Christians to other Christians, white people to other white people, thinkers to other thinkers, affluent people to other affluent people, and so on. A poverty of friendship will be the outcome. You see, one-dimensional friendship, while having the appearance of connection, can also be quite shallow unless the single dimension that initially attracts us is to each other, and it develops into different dimensions. I don't know how you came in this morning to church. I don't know your context. I don't know your friendships. But I know that a lot of us have these types of friendships. Today, when I'm speaking about community, I'm thinking, how can we have friendships that are the real deal? How can we have friendships that, are totally the opposite of this? C.S. Lewis, he writes this and he says, friendship is born at that moment when one person says to another, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." C.S. Lewis is basically just saying, hey, friendship, the sort of starting point of friendship just happens when we can have a conversation. And through that conversation, there can be this connection. And this connection just forms when we can relate and say, hey, we've actually got something in common. That's the starting point. You see, authentic friendship is a lot harder than these other three versions of friendship. I see it as like this sandpaper. When you take sandpaper and you sort of take two pieces of sandpaper and you rub them together. Like there's friction, it's hard, it burns. Sometimes, it's really, really tough. But as you continually do that, it smooths out. It edifies us. It helps us. True friends, real friends, don't only agree with us, but they disagree. Real friends don't only applaud each other's strengths, but they also challenge each other's weaknesses. Real friends don't only enjoy life together, but we also struggle through life together. Real friends not only praise one another, but we apologize to and forgive one another. Real friends not only rally around their points of agreement, but love and learn from their points of disagreement. And when this happens, when friendship grows beyond one-dimensional to many dimensions, this poverty of friendship is replaced by a richness of friendship. I wanted to read you all this because I thought, man, I want this to set the platform to what friendships we are having today. As we live in a world that is so connected, but yet still experiencing so much loneliness and so much isolation. C.S. Lewis, in the best way that I think he describes what real friendship can look like, he says it like this. He says, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. He says, if you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. He goes on and he says, wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. And then he says, put it in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless. And guess what? It will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable. How many of us today are sitting with a heart that we've locked into that coffin? How many of us are living friendship in one of these three versions, either the digital, or we're living it as the transactional or one-dimensional? C.S. Lewis says, hey, if you really want to experience friendship, if you really want to experience community, one of the best ways is to actually love, and loving to a place of being actually vulnerable. If this doesn't make any sense, I thought the best way to try and describe it today is with this table. This table, offers us this feast. It shows us this joy and what can happen around this table. But that can only happen if we're inviting, if we're asking people who are very different to us to be around this table. There's a story in the Bible, and it's a story of the Last Supper, where Jesus is with his disciples. These were the 12 guys that followed him all around, and he said, hey, I want you guys to follow me. I want you to follow my every move. And this is sort of the last time that they're all together. While Jesus is with them, he's sitting either around a table. Scholars are not sure if they're on seats or that they're not on seats. But there's this picture of all the disciples gathered round. And Jesus, he knows that one of his followers, one of his friends, is about to betray him. He knows this. Jesus, as the story goes, he then goes to each and every one of them. And as they are his guests, and as was the custom in that day, he serves each one of them by washing their feet. He gets to Peter, one of the disciples, and Peter says, no, you can't wash my feet. And he says to Peter, hey, unless I wash your feet, you have no part with me. Peter says, hey, just wash me, cover me. And then as they are having this meal together, as they're breaking bread, he says, hey, someone is going to betray him. And it's one of the guys around the table. He knows who it is. He knows it's Judas. And one of the interesting things is these different paintings that a lot of painters have painted about this Last Supper. This was one of the first. And yeah, you can see all the disciples gathered around the table, all of them with sort of their halos there. And this guy on this side is Judas. Have any of you ever seen this painting before? How about this one? We've all seen this one, right? This is whose painting? Yeah, Leonardo da Vinci. And this is their painting of the Last Supper. This is the story. And if you've read the Da Vinci Code, you'll know all the controversy and all the stories and the conspiracy theories and everything else that goes around this story. But one of the most, surprising things to me is where Judas is portrayed over there, and Jesus is sitting there, and he's around the table, and basically, he's got the seat for Judas. My question is, why does Jesus even offer Judas a seat around the table? Think about this. If we were going to have a last meal with all your closest friends, all right, and you knew that this person was going to betray you, you knew that this person was the sole cause of everything that was going to happen, that was going to be bad to you, why would you even invite them to the meal? Why would you even have them there? I could tell you 1,000 reasons why I wouldn't want them there. Jesus has Judas there. And as the story goes on, Judas finds out that Jesus knows that he's going to betray him, and then he leaves. And when he leaves, Jesus actually teaches this lesson to all his disciples. He says, hey guys, I want you to love one another. I want you to love one another. I never really got this story, and I still don't get it that Jesus would invite Judas to the table. The story goes on, and this even surprises me even more, is that then Judas goes out and he betrays Jesus. He goes and he tells the religious leaders and the Roman soldiers exactly where Jesus is, and he gets his money that he's earned. And as he approaches Jesus, as he comes back to him, they're in the Garden of Gethsemane. He gives him a kiss on the cheek. And this is what Jesus responds with. This is what Jesus says to Judas then. Jesus replied and he says, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. I can tell you guys a million other words that I would have called Judas right there. I would have never called him friend. Can you understand the logic? Why? Why would Jesus do this? Why even at the time where he's going to be seized and taken captive, why does he even call Judas a friend? Why does he have him around the table? You see, maybe Jesus, was trying to teach us something about community, about friendships. Maybe Jesus was trying to show us something completely different to the culture, to the way everyone else would see friendships. You know, in a world that we live in now that is just full of all these likes, Jesus just tries to point people back to love. And you see, Jesus here was teaching something brand new. It was something that even his disciples didn't grasp and understand completely. It was this new way. It was also known as a third race. It was actually separating, not separating anymore anyone from the table. But in actual fact now, he was saying, hey, I want you guys to know that everyone's invited. Every single person is invited around this table. I can just imagine the disciples, and I mean, if I was in that context, they'll be like, wait a minute, Jesus, what about the rapist? No. He's actually got a seat at the table. Okay. The rapist, okay. But what about what about those suicide bombers? I mean, what about them, Jesus? No. They got a seat at the table. No. Are you serious? What about, like Jesus, honestly, like what about that one person? You know that person. That person who continuously comes into my mind all the time because they have hurt me unjustly. He says, no, you see, my community, so everyone has a seat around the table. You see, community in Jesus' context was so uncommon because it was all these misfits. It was all these people with such crazy backgrounds. He had prostitutes, he had tax collectors, he had all the outcasts around the table. Jesus was the one who was discriminated the whole time. And people said, hey, this is the guy who hangs out with the tax collectors. He's the guy who eats with the sinners. Jesus is like, hey, that's my community. That's the way I'm doing it. And then he challenges his disciples and he says, hey guys, this is what I want you guys to go and do, is I want you to go and love one another. Scott Saul says this, he says, real friendship happens when we move toward the people we are most tempted to avoid. If you want to experience depth, if you want to experience true faith in Christianity, it's when we move towards people who look nothing like us. It's when we move towards people who actually we thought, man, we'll never get on. Jesus then shares this with his disciples, and they start this movement that we speak about continuously here at Gracegate. This new way, this church, this authentic community. In Acts 2, Paul shares about how this community looked. He said they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. They said, hey, you know what? We're going to try and live this way, this way that Jesus has taught us, because it's a different mindset altogether to the way culture is teaching us. They got together, they learned, they cared for one another, they prayed for one another. And everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. I thought a bit about this. I thought, can you imagine as the disciples, as the Jesus followers were starting this new movement, how many people would have just been awed, like, what? Like, I can have a seat at the table? I'm welcome? How can that person be there? All the believers were together and they had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. This community was like, you know what? If that person's in need, I'm going to do whatever I possibly can to help, support. He says every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This is how this movement continued to form as they met together, as they sort of dined around the table, as they said, hey, you're invited. You're invited. Come, let's share a meal together. That's what church is. That's what community is. At Gracegate, I can remember a couple of years ago when we were thinking about, man, what is the biggest need in our community? What do we see as a need where we can get involved and where we can help? And one of the things that came up was, man, there are so many young mums in this community. And we hope and we pray that we can actually do something for them. A couple of years, weeks or months later, we started the Young Mums program here at Gracegate. And if you've been here for a while, you'll know our Young Mums program is the life and energy at Gracegate. It's so exciting to have young mums here daily, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and sometimes Thursday, Friday, just hanging out, just being here. I thought, man, when I think about this, I thought, like, man, would I have ever thought that, I'd be able to connect with young mums? Like that's not me. Like, I want to be single. I want to connect with the sports guys and, be with them. But over the past years, we've seen friendships. Over the past years, we've seen more young mums coming back. Over the past years, we've seen young mums and their kids grow up. And over the past year or couple months, we've had the privilege of actually having some of the young mums who are sitting here today in church. And they're a great bunch. They've taken ownership. A lot of them are so involved at Gracegate. And it is seriously something that, I can't explain it to you, but I can say, hey, come and see and experience it for yourself. You see, what Jesus was saying to his disciples and what he was practicing around the table was something that it can be taught. I mean, you can know everything about it, but actually you have to experience it for yourself. Going to finish off with a story here in the Bible, and this story, it just made me see things a bit differently. And it's a story about this blind man. Listen carefully to this. It says it's found in Mark chapter 8, and it says, They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. Yes, some friends are bringing a blind man to Jesus, and they're like, hey, Jesus, this guy needs healing. Please, can you touch him? He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Interesting. Jesus takes the blind man and he leads him outside the village. And when he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, do you see anything? Crazy story. It's in Mark. Blind guy, Jesus takes him out to the village, spits in his eyes, okay? Anyone want to try to test that out? Weird story, right? And then Jesus asks him, he says, do you see anything? His response is this. He says, he looked up and he said, I see people, they look like trees walking around. Goes on once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. What just happened here? Like, did Jesus get it wrong the first time? Is this the first time that the party trick didn't work? Did he lose connection with the Father? No. Jesus is obviously so intentional about what he was doing here. And I thought, like, what can we discover from this story? What can we take from this story? You see, this blind man, he saw people, but this blind man, the way he saw people, they were not real to him. They appeared like trees, objects, something that just had to be fixed. Seeing people as trees means he's not healed yet. Seeing people as trees means he's not healed yet. Once more, Jesus puts his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. You see, seeing people is a good start, right? But it's only a partial correction. And when people are objects, our vision still needs the healing touch that only Jesus can bring. You see, this story depicts to me, it shows me that, hey, how do I see people? Do I sometimes see people just as trees or objects or not real? And I do. It's hard for me sometimes. I can tell you, if there's someone who's betrayed me, like Judas, he's not going to have a seat around my table. But Jesus teaches a different way, and then he touches this man. He touches his eyes. And for the first time, this man can see clearly. I don't know how you see people. I don't know how you see community. And I don't know sometimes, but I know in my life, sometimes when I think about other people, I see their splinter in their eye, but I have a massive big log in my own. Here Jesus is saying, hey, if you want to have true community, if you want to experience friendship like never ever before, you need to move. Move towards people who are nothing like you. Move towards people who don't agree with you. Move towards people who are going to hurt you. And that's where you'll experience the power of Jesus. Today, I'm encouraging all of us to come and see community. Come and experience it for yourself. And it's as simple as just getting around a table and saying, hey, let's share a meal. Let's hang out. Let's become friends. Hey God, today we're thankful for friendships, and we're thankful that you bring people in our lives that we can connect with. And God, I pray that, whatever friendships we have in our life, that you will give us wisdom on how to, grow those friendships. I pray that, people that we maybe have neglected or sort of kicked out and thought, they're not welcome around the table, that we'll make the effort to, see them in the way that you see us. And I pray that we can connect with them. God, I pray that you'll challenge us to grow in community, to grow in depth, to grow in our friendships. In Jesus' name, amen.